Hello and welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new, welcome. I'm Marie. How have y'all been? It's been a minute, you know. At this point, I feel like I shouldn't even apologize because I'm a flop. But I know it's been a minute. But being that we all have so much free time now, you're gonna be seeing a lot more of me. So, woo! I hope some of y'all are excited for that, because yeah, I mean, it's nice having some free time, not gonna lie. I need to get my life together. But how has quarantine been for y'all so far? Have y'all like picked up any new hobbies? You know, are you in school still? Are you working? Like, what is going on with y'all? How are you handling quarantine? Like me so far, I don't even know. It's really not that bad because I tend to stay in the house anyway, but I do miss going outside sometimes. I'm not gonna lie. But yeah, even though I still work sometimes, but it's just not the same. I'm ready to have my summer back, even though it's not summer yet, but it's almost summer. The spring is basically ruined, but it's fine. It's whatever, you know. I'm ready for it to be summer. But I'm not gonna ramble too long, so you know I like to freaking talk. But for today's video, I'm gonna be watching a scary video because it's been a minute since I've seen a good scary video. And you know, like I said in my other videos, I'm really trying to get back to not being a scaredy pants all the time. And not gonna lie, like last weekend I saw The Grudge and it freaking scared me. And I don't even know why, because The Grudge isn't that scary. It's really not. But I was terrified. But that's besides the point. We're gonna watch this video. It's called, oh my gosh, I can't even get my headphones right. But this video is called 4 True Terrifying Babysitting Stories. So I mean it's babysitting. How scary could babysitting be? I don't freaking know. But we're gonna find out. Yeah. I'm already a little scared because videos by Mr. Haunted and his videos always get me. But you know, we're gonna get through it together because that's why we're a family, right? So yeah. Okay. Oh my gosh, freaking window is so bright. I'm so sorry. Okay, let me get my life together. Oh my god, I'm like stalling. Alright, now I'm sweating. Okay, let's just watch it. See, I'm not good at stuff like this. I'm really not. But it's okay. It's okay.
This experience happened to me when I was in my late 20s. I was fresh out of college and I desperately needed a job. Within a few weeks, I had found a job for babysitting, which seemed simple enough as I had dealt with many kids throughout my life. The kid I'd be watching over was 8 years old. His name was Matthew, and he seemed nice at first when I met him. His parents went over a few rules I should follow that seemed fairly simple. Put Matthew in bed by 9, make dinner by 7, no
simple.
going outside, check up on him once in a while, etc. That was pretty much it. Just some basic house rules you'd expect when babysitting. Matthew apparently had some form of autism, making him a bit awkward, claimed his mom, so she made sure I understood. I told them that I'd make sure everything went according to plan. His parents then left and it was just me and him. Matthew went upstairs to his room to, I guess, do whatever 8-year-olds do. I didn't want to disturb him, so I let him do his own thing while I sat down on the couch to watch some TV. At one point, I invited Matthew to come watch with me, but he instead seemed more interested in whatever he was doing up in his room. The night went on, and he came down to have a couple of sandwiches I made as instructed by his parents. I noticed that Matthew seemed to be eating his sandwiches a bit too fast, and after he was done, he immediately went up back to his room. I laughed to myself and let him go about his business while I ate my food. 9 o'clock comes around and I told Matthew that it was time for bed, and he gladly abided by what I said without complaining, which made me feel good knowing that he cooperated. I turned his light off and went back downstairs to finish
Here it
watching
comes.
my movie. I remember I fell asleep at some point and woke up to thumps coming from upstairs. I got up and went to Matthew's room, but was unexpectedly surprised to still find him asleep. In fact, it looked like he'd been asleep for a while now, so I dismissed it as it being the wind from outside.
Nope.
However,
I
as
would've
soon as I
left.
came back downstairs, I heard the same noise again. This time, I listened carefully and made the sound out to be rapid footsteps. At this point, I knew it was Matthew, so I went back upstairs until I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The door that led up into the attic was now open, and I was confused as to why
Oh
the hell he
no,
was
I
up
would have
there.
laughed.
I called out for Matthew, but there was no response. I climbed up the ladder and used the light from my phone to try and locate Matthew, as this was before iPhones had built-in flashlights. Then, not even 5 seconds later, I hear a laugh of a small child from the corner of the attic. I turned my brightness up and shined it to where I heard it, only to see nothing. I felt my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. I ran back down the attic ladder and shut the door and went into Matthew's room, who was still asleep. Needless to say, I stayed awake the whole night talking with my girlfriend about what had just happened, but she didn't buy into it. But can you blame her? The next morning, Matthew's parents came back and paid me, but I never did tell them what I had witnessed that evening, because I know what happened.
What?
I just don't have
Oh,
enough
no.
words to explain it. The parents called me once more after that to babysit Matthew, but I politely declined their
Oh,
offer.
heck yeah. That's terrifying.
To say the least.
Why?
I quit babysitting after
What the
that.
heck? Oh no. Absolutely not. I can't.
This story takes place 10 years ago, when I was 16, and for almost that long I've waited to tell it. I'm 25 now and a female, I should note. It surely won't be as terrifying as the best on here, but I think it's a contender. It's played on my mind ever since it happened, if that's anything to go by. I guess we'll see. When I was in high school, I babysat on an odd occasion for a family I'd known since I was pretty young. They were great, really laid back, and it was the easiest babysitting job in the world, because the kids would usually be in bed before I got there, and always slept really well. It'd been about a year since I babysat for them,
No.
and in that time they had a new baby,
Nope.
who was about 6 months old. So on this occasion it was me, 3 kids downstairs and 1 baby sleeping upstairs. I should really mention before anything that their house was completely amazing. It wasn't the flashiest, but it was huge. And although it was in a suburban street, it was positioned on the hill, so far from the master bedroom upstairs you could look out over the whole city. They had tons of CDs, which back then was really exciting for me. The kitchen was always full, and the whole place was decorated like a gallery. Amazing art, brilliant design, and really spacious. That sort of thing. They always had interesting stuff around too. That night I noticed in the front room, amongst the kids' stuff, there was a fake samurai sword. I remember laughing at it, thinking it looked too real to be a toy. And waving it around a bit, and it didn't surprise me. They were interesting people, and I always find things I liked. The layout of the house was cool too. The front door opened almost directly in the living room, and off to the side we had the 2 kids' bedrooms, and then a staircase leading to the upstairs to the parents' bedroom. The living room was fantastic, with giant windows overlooking the front garden and almost the entire street. The middle part of the house was completely open plan, with the kitchen and dining room spread out for what seemed like miles. Near the back of the house, they even had a small study, which was more like a reading nook from memory. It was just an armchair and 2 walls of books. That part is important, because the night this happened, that's where I was hanging out. I'd been dropped off by my parents around 8:30, and the mom and dad left soon after, telling me the kids were fast asleep, and that if I had any problems with the baby I could wake their eldest daughter, who was good at settling him and would help me if I needed it. I remember being comforted by that, because I knew virtually nothing about babies. I didn't need it, in the end, because the kids slept fine. But the important thing is, I felt safe, at ease. They told me they would be back around 1 a.m., and to call if I needed anything. I wasn't worried. I'd done this countless times before, and even though it was a cold night with a harsh wind, I knew this house.
Sure. Okay.
I knew the kids would sleep, and I knew nothing would happen. I felt completely at home. I felt so safe, actually, that I had trouble locking the screen door after they'd gone.
Absolutely not.
I didn't stress too much about it.
Nope.
Thought maybe it was jammed or something. I didn't have a key to the front door, and usually the screen door shut just fine. They lived in a good neighborhood, though, and it didn't occur to me at the time that there was anything to worry about. I quickly forgot about it, and went to the study to read after quickly peeking in on the kids. I lost track of time for a while. I didn't have a mobile phone back when I was 16, and there was no clock in the reading nook. I was totally lost in a book, and before I knew it, a couple of hours had gone by.
Oh, stop.
But I wasn't realizing the time that woke me from my sleeping stupor. It was nothing at all, and that was so frightening. I'd been deep in the book, and then all of a sudden looked up and felt such a sense of dread. Suddenly everything seemed more quiet. Then I heard the wind. An unease and fear washed over me, so much so that I felt reluctant to move. I didn't understand. I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. I thought as I stared at the books on the wall, that maybe I'd just been sitting too long. So I got up and slowly wandered into the kitchen, with the intent of checking on the kids and then maybe watching some TV. The front living room was in darkness, and as I stepped into it on my way to the bedroom, something stopped me dead in my tracks. With the lights of the kitchen illuminating me from behind, I stood frozen, paralyzed by the sight of a man standing in the front garden. He didn't move, and I didn't either. I could see that he had shut the garden gate behind him, and from his position in the garden, it was clear he'd been walking towards the front door. The front door that was unlocked. I didn't know what to do. A million thoughts overwhelmed me, and I had no weapons. The door was open, and I couldn't get to the kids downstairs and the baby upstairs at the same time. He was huge, and I was small.
That's my worst nightmare.
I was lit, and he was in darkness, dressed all in black. I've never seen anything more terrifying in my life. I knew if I didn't do something, he would come inside and get us. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I spotted the fake samurai sword, and very slowly bending down slightly, but not taking my eyes off the figure in the garden, I picked it up and raised it in the air above my head. I don't know why, but I couldn't think of anything else. And after what seemed like an eternity, he turned and slowly walked towards the gate, opened it, and walked down the street. It was only then I saw the glint of something in his side, something he had hidden in one hand as he stood staring into the house. I stood there for a long time, watching him walk away, and then I ran to the front door and leaned against it, forcing it shut against an intruder that was no longer there. I was 16, and I was stupid. I never called anyone. I stayed that way until the parents got home, and I never told them what happened. I never told anyone for a long time. I thought everyone would blame me for putting the kids in danger. And then I convinced myself that it was nothing, and maybe I overreacted. The family today are fine and well. Nothing ever happened to them or their house after that night. But I had always been thankful that moment of intense dread that caused me to leave the study. Because if I hadn't, I don't even let myself think of how differently that night would have gone. So, man in the garden, I hope that fake sword was enough to scare you away from lurking outside people's houses in the night. And I hope we never meet again.
I'm not ready for this.
This story is told from the perspective of a female. About 6 years ago, I lived downtown in a very big part of New York City with my mom and 2 younger sisters. I had gotten a job as a babysitter about a month after living there to have some extra money come in for the family, as we were living off of food stamps and desperately needed a second source of income. Needless to say, I loved being a babysitter. It could be a hassle having to deal with certain kids, but it starts to grow on you when you tolerate it. However, there was this one kid I babysat that'll never get off my mind. Her name was Victoria,
Yeah,
and she was 12 years old, which some might argue as being too old for a babysitter. But hey, it was my job, and I liked it. Victoria was really kind, if anything a bit socially awkward, but that didn't seem to matter to me. When her parents left, we played some board games, watched TV, and I did my best to keep her occupied as possible. At around 10 p.m., I put Victoria to bed, as that was what her parents told me to do, and then went to go finish my dinner I had ordered. About 20 minutes later, I heard Victoria's door open and her walking down the hallway. I went to go see what she was up to and saw her standing by the stairs that led down into the basement. I asked her what she was doing up so late and if she needed anything. She looked at me with this menacing stare I still can't even describe, and then slightly grins at me and ran back to her room. I walked over to the stairs and felt my heart drop into the pit of my stomach. About halfway down the stairs, I could see the outline of a human silhouette sitting on one of the steps. I didn't even dream of turning on that basement light. I instead went to Victoria's room and locked her door and called the police, and they then arrived soon. But they never found anyone down there. They did, however, manage to find various kitchen knives and sticky notes in a hidden part of their basement. It kills me knowing that this family had been living with someone in their basement that they had no knowledge of for God knows how long. Police reported what they found to the family, but they ended up moving out of state a month later.
I can't watch anymore. I can't. That is too much. That is like my biggest fear of owning a house or living anywhere.
I was about 6 years old when my encounter with this creep happened.
Absolutely
My mom and I lived in a quiet, semi-ratchet neighborhood, and across the street from us lived this very old Hispanic man. He was super old and bony, and he may have been in his 70s or around that. I'm not too sure. It was a long time ago, and he would often sit in his front yard for hours on end. Now this obviously isn't very suspicious at first glance. Yet nothing is ever that simple. My cousin used to live right down the street from us and would always visit us on the weekends. So as you'd expect, he would play outside in the front yard. And of course, this old man would be there. He would usually just sit there and watch us. And as small children, none of us really paid attention. Until he started coming over. He had this mango tree in his backyard and would always come over and offer my mother and I mangoes. My mom would always try to have a talk with him, since I was a shy kid and hated talking to people. Even now, I still have a small fear of talking to older men. Just something I've never been able to shake off for an unknown reason. This behavior isn't really shady, until he started calling me over to talk to him. Every day after school, he would be outside and would call me over. And my mom, being quite naive at the time, would tell me to say hi. But I would relentlessly refuse. In the instances where she would force me to go over, he would speak to me as I was some sort of pet. He would ask me if I would grow up to be a beautiful young woman, and if I was willing to start growing into a woman now. He would also ask me explicit things, but being 6, I had no idea what the hell he was talking about.
God, no.
He also had a weird habit of trying to grab my hands. I was always so confused what he was asking me. And it didn't make the situation any better that he was talking in Spanish, and I can only understand my mom. When my cousins were over, he would always call my little cousin, who is, I think, about 2 years younger than me. I don't remember, I haven't seen them in years. He'd always ask her simple things and pretty much say the same stuff, but none of us could understand. Eventually, the behavior got so progressively worse. Every time I came from school, he would walk over to us and try to touch my head, shoulders, and even try to get me to hug him or pick me up at certain points. And by instinct, I would hide behind my mother. No, this is where it gets bad. My 2 older brothers lived with us, but them being high school students, they obviously had to go to work. But my mom tasked them on babysitting me, to which they would never listen. So I was pretty much left alone until my mom came home around 7. The old man noticed this. Every time my family left me alone, he would show up like clockwork and knock on the door asking if anyone was home. He would stand around and then leave. He did this pretty much every day until we moved. I was a pretty vocal child to my mom, so if I didn't like someone, I would tell her. And so I told her I didn't like the man and that he was weird, and that I didn't want him coming over anymore. My mistake. She thought I had meant that I didn't want him coming by to bring us mangoes. And I had failed to mention that this guy was coming by and knocking on the door, and the like. And so the cycle continued, for about 2 more years. I would say as I got older I stopped inviting my cousins over, and instead went to their house. Every time I got home from school I would bolt from our door and run inside our home. I never made eye contact and would always hide in my room whenever he came over. Then we finally moved. We actually had moved out during the evening and pretty sporadically due to family issues. I had no idea about it, but we did. And I was super happy about it. We moved to an apartment complex closer to my school and away from the neighborhood that I had lived in my entire life. I thought that was the end of it, but a while after we went back to visit him. Apparently my mom felt bad about leaving without saying goodbye to the nice old man. As my mom called him, we went back weeks after, but we stayed in his front lawn and he sat there talking to us. I just sat to the side and failed to look at him, and I was pretty awkward the entire time. My mom several times tried to make me talk to him again. He tried making some very questionable physical contact that I clearly denied. It was at this moment I guess my mother picked up on the behavior, and very subtly pulled me across for her and politely told the old man we had to leave. We never went back again, and that was the end of it, for 8 years. Flash forward said 8 years. We had moved back to the neighborhood years prior, but in a different area. Obviously, as a 16-year-old, I wanted to keep a healthy weight and took pride in my appearance, as do lots of teens. I would run around the neighborhood and typically pick the same route. Until one day, the route I usually took was blocked by cars due to a party that was happening. I didn't feel like dealing with it, so I took a different route, and came across the street that I used to live in. I jogged casually looking around seeing how little had changed until I saw my house, and then looked ahead. And what do you know, there was the same old man, sitting in the same spot. Keep in mind there were a bunch of girls in tank tops and shorts sitting on a car across from him. So there's that. I had my music in and ignored the guy and just planned to be a normal jogger. As I passed by, the man reached out to me, and I stopped and pulled my headphones out and politely said, "Yes?" He looked at me for a second and my gut was just screeching at me to leave at that moment. He stared at me before he broke out into a grin. He then told me he had recognized me as the little girl from years before, and complimented me on my appearance. He went into detail about how he loved to watch me play in my front yard, and all in all, he seemed a bit pleasant, and thought maybe I had been overreacting as a small child. He had spoke to me about how I'd grown up, and how he had missed how small and beautiful I was. I soon realized I should have listened to my gut instinct. After complimenting me, he asked if I had a boyfriend, to which I responded no, to which he said that was good. He then asked if I was still a virgin after all these years, and I came to realize that he was practically asking me all the explicit questions he had asked me as a small child. But this time I did understand. The last straw was when he had asked if I wanted to come inside so he could treat me, but I declined and left. I never took that route again. Days later I told my mom everything about the guy, and when I asked her what was wrong with him, she told me that my aunt had told her that his wife had died years before we moved into that house, and he had just kind of lost it, and everyone pretty much suspected that he was some sort of drug addict creeper. But no one knew that info until we moved from that place years later. So, old Mango Man, let's not meet ever again.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, that was slightly terrifying. Wow. Like, I don't even know what to say. Definitely reminds me that whenever I get a house, to make sure it's not that big so I don't have to worry about people living in it. That's like my biggest fear. Like, how do you just live in somebody's house? Like, how? That is terrifying. Don't ever do that. Oh my god. It's like all my worst fears wrapped up into one video. Oof. But you know, it's all good though. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We made it to the end. We survived. Whew. Well, yeah, I'm gonna go, you know, get my life together because that was terrifying. But I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. And I'll be seeing y'all next week, actually. So, yeah, make sure to ring that notification bell so you know when I'm posting. Or if you follow me on Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is, yeah, I'll be sure to let you know on there as well. But I'm a little tear shooketh at the moment. So yeah, I'm gonna go.